Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers' appearance on the Pat McAfee Show, where he said 2025 is pretty sure is his last season. But that could benefit the Steelers in more ways than one. We'll talk about that next here, as well as take all your questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. All right, Steelers fans, let's dive right into it. I did a short that appeared on my YouTube, Instagram, TikToks, all my social medias. So if you saw that, you got a twist of it. But for those who might have missed it, Aaron Rodgers made an appearance yesterday, as we talked about on yesterday's episode leading into this. But he made an appearance on Pat McAfee's show, talking about his career, answering several different questions. We'll get to different elements of this. But the crux of it being, when he was asked about this being his last year in the NFL, he said, quote, "I'm pretty sure this is it. That's why him and the Steelers, just did a one-year deal. This is really about finishing with the game with a lot of love, fun, and peace, and what a place to finish with one of the cornerstones of the NFL." Then he went to talk a bit about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that kind of was the biggest news that came out of it. I thought there were some other interesting things that he talked about, especially saying that he doesn't really have as much of a chip on his shoulder. He said, quote, "I didn't need this. I don't feel the need to prove anything to anybody," which is kind of interesting. He also talked about how he thinks he's tired of people being in his public, being in his life. As far as like the public eye and paparazzi, he can't wait for the private life. And he also says that once he's done with the Steelers, he's out of the public eye. He's just going to be Aaron Rodgers, living the private life and doing what he wants to do. And there's a whole lot of other things that go into that. But the big thing for the Steelers, I think, is the fact that Aaron Rodgers is saying, hey, yeah, this is pretty much it. And we all kind of thought it was. I entertained a question on the Locked On Steelers call-in line. By the way, if you ever want to call in, it's 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. We will have questions later on this show. But I thought it was interesting, because when I entertained it, I said, hey, the only way I can see Aaron Rodgers coming back for a second year with the Steelers is if the year one goes so well and they fall like just short of a Super Bowl championship. Because, and this is why I'm giving it like a 98% chance that this is his last season, because either A, the Steelers do kind of what they have been doing. They finished 9-10, maybe even 11 wins. Maybe they win a playoff game if they don't win a playoff game. But as long as they don't get to like the AFC Championship and come up like just short against the Chiefs or the Bills or someone like that, and it's like, they're really close, and if they just add another piece next year, they can really do it. Maybe Aaron Rodgers comes back just for that reason, because one thing he also talked about in this interview was how much he liked Mike Tomlin, and how much it seemed like there's a natural conversation between them. Him and Mike would just check in. He would just talk to each other and check in on each other, and he said it was very natural, and the Steelers respected his space when he said he needed some privacy. So if this year goes very well and he doesn't win a Super Bowl, I can see Aaron Rodgers coming back. Because here's the other flip side of it. Let's go the complete. I don't think there's any way this can happen with the way the Steelers are right now. A lot of things would have to work out for the Steelers this year for this to happen. Let's say they win a Super Bowl. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, yeah, that's my sunset. That's my Peyton Manning moment. That's my Jerome Bettis moment. That's my Ray Lewis. I think Ray. That's my Ray Lewis moment. I'm taking it out. I'm getting my second championship, and I'm walking out into the sunset. And I think that would be perfect for his legacy, for his identity. Like that would be awesome. And so I have a hard time seeing him go against that. So there would have to be the ultimate sweet spot that the team was just so good that they were right on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl. And he said, you know what? I got one more in me. I could come back. He pulls a Vince Carter and he says, bring me back up in there. I'm going to do this again. We're going to have an even more experienced offensive line. Maybe the Steelers add another playmaker at wide receiver. Maybe there's better things developing on the team. And the Steelers could also benefit to say, hey, you could be, the buffer to help whatever young quarterback that we draft next year, to kind of learn from a guy who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. And so maybe that's it. But for the Steelers, I think this is a good thing, because this means, hey, everything that he's been saying about being a servant leader, about being a guy he wants to just kind of help the team, it continues to fit that mold that we've been talking about, right? It seems like because there's always the question, oh, does he really mean it? We saw his beefs with Robert Saleh and things like that. The more and more he talks, the more and more he at least checks the boxes of saying the things that he needs to say to prove that he's just with the Steelers to help win, enjoy playing football, and be part of what they're trying to build. I thought it was also interesting when, if you remember, I brought up a question of leadership to him when we talked to him for the first time during minicamp a couple weeks back. And when I talked to him, I asked him about leadership. He talked about being a servant leader and how he wants to earn it. Well, listen to this. When Pat McAfee asked him about leadership on the Steelers team and on the offensive side of the ball, he said, quote, Aaron Rodgers said, quote, "I really want the mantle of leadership on offense, and I'm going to earn it every day of training camp. There's some stability I can bring having played in a similar system and having played a lot of football." He also talked a lot about how the Steelers have great leaders already, talking about Cam Hayward, talking about TJ Watt, talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick, talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick's football IQ and how they have those kind of leaders. He also said, and I thought this was also interesting, that DK Metcalf is a really good leader, and DK Metcalf's presence with the Steelers is a big reason, quote unquote, a big reason why he came to Pittsburgh. All that checks the boxes as far as Aaron Rodgers is just happy to be in town. I mean, again, if the contract wasn't enough of a sign that, hey, he's not trying to, be the guy that commandeers the entire ship and says, do everything that I want you to do. I think that that's kind of a welcome thing. And if the Steelers are getting that kind of Aaron Rodgers and, he's not trying to take over games and throw 50 passes a game, and he's kind of playing to what their scheme is. And of course, again, whatever Aaron Rodgers does, it doesn't matter as much as this team needs a lot of these younger groups to start to form up. Like, this offensive line needs to take a serious step forward this year. The run game needs to take a serious step forward this year. The run defense needs to take a serious step forward this year. Those things need to happen, and you need to see guys like Joey Porter Jr. come into his own. But if those things happen and Aaron Rodgers is just like that quarterback who's just like, hey, I'm just here to help, and he's making smart decisions. And let's face it, I think Aaron Rodgers might be the best cerebral quarterback the Steelers might have ever had, because Ben Roethlisberger was more of a gunslinger than he was a field, reader than anything else. But I think that could be the thing that really helps the Steelers and does give them a chance to be competitive this upcoming year. And again, if the offensive line ain't doing all what they need to do, none of this will really matter as much. Aaron Rodgers will be trying to do some extra things. He'll probably face a lot more pressures. He'll be under siege, and that'll bring up some questions about backup quarterbacks, and we'll get to that later in the show because there's a question around that. But I do think it gives the Steelers a chance to find that stability that they've been looking for, that identity they've been looking for. If he can fit that identity that he talked about, hey, this is going to be a similar system. He's used to kind of things. He's used to Pittsburgh type of guys too, and all the coaches that he's named that he's worked with over the years. I could see something working out where he helps them find that stability with the rest of the offense, and that becomes a thing that lasts for the Steelers and carries over into what you hope will be the Super Bowl window that you're hoping to open up by drafting a high up in the NFL draft next year, trading up to go get your guy and saying that this next guy we take next year is our franchise quarterback, and there's a mold for them to fit because Aaron Rodgers has already fit into it at 42 years old. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's a question about that stability that I think is a very good question that one of our callers asked, and that kind of questions, can it really be attained with all the things the Steelers have gone through? We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer because over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into some of these call-in questions that I think are some good ones. It kind of revolve around this, and I feel proud of myself that I saved this one because I wanted to get this one earlier in the week, but I was kind of stacking up like when I'm using some of these questions. But this one comes around the stability of the Steelers offense and involving recent history in what they've done. So here's Bo from Greenville, who puts out a very good point about how the Steelers can move forward. Take it away, Bo.
Hey, Chris, this is Bo from Greenville, South Carolina. Love the show. I was just calling in with a question about the offense. If you look back at week 1 last year and our game against Atlanta, the starting lineup, the depth chart, if you look at 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end, we have 6 different people in our current depth chart than we did week 1 last year. I'm just wondering how the offense is supposed to find that identity and just have that chemistry when you have that much change, especially when you're considering a new quarterback, number 1 running back, new number 1 wide receiver. How are they supposed to find that chemistry and overcome that and find that identity moving forward? And that doesn't even include Broderick Jones switching to the other side of the line. I love the show. Appreciate everything you do, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. Bo, as always, you can call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Appreciate all those who do call into the show here. So let's go over a few things. So yeah, you know what? There are going to be challenges as far as finding your rhythm offensively. But I don't think it's going to be this grandeur thing that's going to take a whole lot of extra stuff. I think it's going to be about, can they hit on some cylinders? Can they build some rhythm on offense with some success? That's going to be the key here, and it's going to come down to, can the offensive line perform? Can the playmakers, get into lockstep with Aaron Rodgers? And if they do those things, I think it can work out in their favor. But I do think that you bring up a good point that, like, hey, this is a lot of turnover, because you even go back to, like, the first thing I think about when I try to think about historically when there was a big switch in the offense, how did it, personnel-wise, how did the Steelers handle it? Well, the first thing I thought back to was Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season. They went from Tommy Maddox to Ben Roethlisberger, a rookie quarterback. In 2003, they went from the 19th best scoring offense to the 11th best scoring offense, and then a year later, they went to the 9th best scoring offense. And in just 2 years' time, there was a lot of flipping around. Tommy Maddox was gone, so was Plaxico Burress, and there were different elements of the team that changed. But to me, I hear you out, though, because there's more than just that changing. Broderick Jones flipping from right to left. Troy Fautanu is going to be healthy. Zach Frazier is in his second year, so that's one thing is stability. But Mason McCormick's going to be it'll be a full-time starter. DK Metcalf's with the team. There are a lot of new things. I do think they can hit the ground running, but I also think that there's the chance that it's going to be less about how many new faces and more about which faces produce the best. And I think that's the thing that the Steelers are going to have to focus on, is if they can get Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, that whole offensive line to get in sync with each other. And Zach Frazier talked about that during OTAs. And by the way, I wrote a piece about this in the Post-Gazette. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more tomorrow, about Zach Frazier being the quarterback of the offensive line and how he looks to take a step forward this year. But part of that is requiring just experience with the offensive line, guys, just building up trust with each other, knowing each other, being able to, say, hey, we've been through the wars. We've been through understanding how different defenses approach us. I talked about this with Alan Saunders a bit yesterday, I believe actually on his show, the afternoon drive. But when we were talking about, I was talking about part of what made that offensive line so good with Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro in the 2010s was that they knew each other. They kept the same starting 5 with Pouncey, DeCastro. I believe it was Gilbert for some time. Villanueva was in there, and Ramon Foster. But there was like a 5-year period where they had the same 5 starting offensive linemen, and that was such a benefit to them because they were able to just say, hey, when we face an odd man front, they're blitzing from this angle or that angle, we know what to do. When they're using an even man front and they're blitzing from this angle or that angle, we know what to do. Excuse me, sneezing here. But when you're talking about offensive lines, that chemistry is important, and that's going to take time. That part I do agree is going to take some things to mold. But I think that's where having a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers could very well help the Steelers take the right steps forward to be able to say, hey, we're going to manage this situation while the offensive lines figure some things out. We got these different concepts that I can work into the offense that'll keep defenses guessing. And then eventually when the offensive line gets going and they do find their chemistry, the run game will be more prominent. We'll be able to pick up more blitzes. We'll be able to figure out what we want to do. We can be the team that catches other teams off guard. That's what the Steelers need to develop. And on top of that, you got DK Metcalf. Can he, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, can they form a good trio of wide receivers? Can Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington unlock more? And I want to talk about that maybe hopefully tomorrow on the podcast, because I got some good quotes from Pat Freiermuth that I still haven't used yet on this show. But I think that there's a lot of elements to this offense that could work with a quarterback that knows how to work different parts of the field, knows how to counter different defenses, and isn't limited in the way that Russell Wilson was. I mean, we talked about it. Russell Wilson was called out by the Ravens on Hard Knocks when they said he likes 3-pointers and layups and nothing in between. And once teams started to catch on to that, it was tough for the Steelers to get around that with Russell Wilson. Aaron Rodgers, by my understanding of watching him, isn't that. He does take his 3-pointers, he does take his layups, but he hits the middle part of the field and he finds different ways to hurt you. When he sees you open in the spot, he'll take advantage of it. He'll be like, okay, they're giving inside leverage to our slot guy. We're gonna make a quick adjustment, get this guy up over the middle, use different route concept to work that. Oh, they're dropping back into a zone. Let's work this. Those are all the different things I think that the Steelers could be opened up by having an Aaron Rodgers. And again, not saying that he's going to do this and lead them to be the number 1 or even a top 10 offense next year, but there could be a version of the Steelers offense that finds a balance with the run game, that where Aaron Rodgers just has to make smart decisions with the football, be efficient with the football. And again, Aaron Rodgers at his best is just being efficient with the football. I think that's the biggest thing that he has going for him. So that being said, to talk about stability, again, it's a good question, Bo, because we still need to see it. And again, I'm not guaranteeing any of this. I need to see this in training camp. And we also know how this goes. You remember how the training camp and preseason looked before the 2023 season? Kenny Pickett was lighting up. They scored a touchdown on every single drive they had with when the first team offense was out there in the preseason, and then it didn't matter. They still got mollywopped by the Niners, and that was a rough start to the season. So I still need to see a lot of things, but they got to check boxes off one by one. And if you check those boxes off, that's what makes you more confident going into the season and helps you hit the ground running. And this is an offense with a lot of young talent on it that has promising prospects on it, guys who have been developing, guys who have been working. Now this is going to be a year for a lot of them to prove that their work can pay off, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be part of it there. So that's how, if they're going to find stability, I think that they can, is that they do have guys that are familiar with the system and can kind of form a new core under that. But let's talk about the possibility of what happens if Aaron Rodgers goes down, because that's something that's very real. I want to talk about that next year and what that might mean for the Steelers and how they try to change things, or how plans you'll move forward with them, of course, with the quarterbacks behind Aaron Rodgers on the depth chart. We'll talk about that next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. If you're like me, you probably have a lot of subscriptions and place a lot of orders online. Over time, that adds up to be a lot of money. Well, with Monarch Money, you can keep a close watch on all that spending in an easy to see, organized, and convenient presentation. Take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year only at Monarch Money. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're going to continue this discussion. We're going to go to a question, and I'm going to kind of go a few different directions with this question. But this question is going to be very specific, and you're gonna know what you're gonna get why I'm going to go in multiple directions with this after the question. But we'll go to Parker in Indianapolis for this one, talking about quarterbacks.
Hey, Chris, this is Parker from Indianapolis, Indiana. I had a question about Will Howard. Is there a small chance that Steelers see something in Will Howard after Rodgers for a year and maybe getting a chance to play some during the regular season, that they decide to not take a quarterback in the first round next year and then just continue to build the team and give Will Howard a chance at starting next year? Thank you for your question.
So thank you, Parker, for your question. As always, 412-223-6644. Several things would have to happen for Will Howard to just be the starter next year for the Steelers. No questions asked. They're not drafting a quarterback. Just, hey, we're riding with Will Howard. That would involve Will Howard playing this year, starting in multiple games and playing very well in multiple games. And again, I'm not saying that Will Howard cannot, because I think this gets misconstrued a lot because I keep talking about Will Howard a lot because a lot of people ask about Will Howard. I think if I went into my total call list log of all the people who've called and asked questions, I think I have 6 unused questions specifically about Will Howard and can he be the future of the team. And I don't bring them up all the time because it gets monotonous. But if Will Howard were to be the starter by 2026 in the season, and the Steelers just say, you know what, forego this really good quarterback class, we have our guy. Something crazy would have had to happen this year. And when I mean something crazy, I mean not just Aaron Rodgers going down, but Mason Rudolph has to go down. And if those two things happen, immediately everyone's going to point to the Steelers and say, season's over, it's a wrap, get them out of here, pack it up, say because hey, you know what? You get to you lose. You're gonna lose a lot of games. Now you can get that super high first round pick that you really wanted to go get your quarterback. But if Will Howard comes in and lights it up, and he turns he hits all the, all things are hitting and everything's on point, which I'm telling you, it's just so unlikely. It is just not. And like I'm not again. I struggle with this because I keep saying this in so many ways. People are like, but you don't count. You're counting him out before he's a 6th round pick. He's a 6th round quarterback pick. And yes, if you're gonna pull the Tom Brady out, I can pull out. One time I did a show here with Alan where I listed like 50 6th round pick quarterbacks or less or like later that you won't even know their names. So like, and I'm not saying Will Howard's going to be one of those guys. I believed in Will Howard enough to say I thought he could have been a 4th round pick, and as a 4th round pick, I thought he could be a future Mason Rudolph for the team. As in, he could develop into a good backup. He can make some occasional plays in the NFL. He can be the guy that fills in for you. And whenever Mason Rudolph moves on, and the thing, he could be the new Mason Rudolph, where he's your placeholder for if things go awry with your starting quarterback, or you just need a bridge guy. Like that is who I think Will Howard is right now. But I want to reiterate, like before that national championship run with Ohio State, people were not looking at him favorably. Like there were people that thought he might not even get drafted if it wasn't for being in what was maybe the most talented offense in college football last year with Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Travion Henderson, the other running back that I can't remember his name right now, Quinshon Judkins, and then multiple first round, like another first round, I think Josh Aaron, whoever the offensive tackle is that went in the first round. They were just stud after stud after stud after stud after stud after stud on that offense. And then there was Will Howard, who was the quarterback. And again, that's not to say he's a bad quarterback, but just got to put it into proper perspective. This is why the biggest thing I keep saying, let him be the 6th round rookie that no expectations are heaped upon. Because when we start saying these things, oh, he's a future starter, he's going to be starting by the end of the year, he's going to be starting by next year. The moment he throws an interception in the preseason game, people are going to be like, well, this guy sucks. And it's like, no, he doesn't suck. He's a developmental prospect in the 6th round, drafted for a reason. He's going to need time to grow. So, Parker, to answer your question, I find it very unlikely. The only way that Will Howard would be that guy by 2026 would be if Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph went down early to mid part of the season. Will Howard comes in and lights it up, and the Steelers go on a serious playoff tear, and he is making great read after great read after great read and just making all the right moves all the times. And it would just the probability of that happening is just so very low. It would be like trying to say, what if who's another person? What if Dante Kent becomes Rod Woodson? What if that cornerback that you drafted in the 7th round, what if he turns into the next, Rod Woodson or Mel Blount or Ike Taylor or whatever. Great. It'd be awesome if you got that. But the likelihood of that happening is low. And so I think the big thing here is, can Will Howard develop into a pinch hitting quarterback by next year? That could be the thing that I think that you want Will Howard to get to, because if Will Howard plays this preseason, I think he will get a good amount of snaps in the preseason. They'll probably do minimal snaps with Rodgers, a good amount of snaps with Rudolph, and then a bunch of time for Will Howard to go up against second, third, and maybe even fourth string guys to get him NFL experience and just get him the preseason experience. He'll hold a clipboard for the rest of the season. And then next year coming into camp, you'll most likely have Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, and then the guy they drafted in the first round. And then that'll be Will Howard could be a nice backup plan for, like, let's say they take Drew Aller or Lou Norris or whoever they take next year in the quarterback room, and they end up not working out. But all of a sudden, Will Howard has been on the bench for 3-4 years, and he's been developing and he's quietly been learning. Then he has NFL experience. Then maybe you could give him he gets the shot and he shines. But I think it's going to take time for Will Howard to develop to the NFL. And I think, listen, this is a guy who, again, I like Will Howard. I talked about him, throughout the college football playoffs. I said all throughout the draft period, I was like, hey, get this guy in the 4th round and you get a good one. And I think, and when they got him in the 6th round, I said, that's a steal. That this is perfect value for what the Steelers needed. But again, he is a backup quarterback right now, and he is a backup to a backup quarterback. He's the 3rd string. So when it comes to the backup quarterback plans, the only way you're seeing Will Howard is if it's like 2019 all over again, where Ben Roethlisberger, his elbow got thrown out, Aaron Rodgers, an injury happens, it ends his career basically. Mason Rudolph goes in and gets like assailed by multiple players, and he's just out for some time. Then Will Howard will go in, and you know what? The Steelers will try their best with him. They'll probably do their best to work things out, and maybe the thing that can work in that crazy situation, if that happens, maybe what happens is the run game's just so good that it makes things easier for Will Howard. He can just play to a simpler offense and not have to take too many complicated steps forward as a rookie. But this game is extremely fast-paced and complex, and there's so many levels to understand it. It's why quarterback is so hard to find the right guys that can play it at the high level and can think at it at the high level. And I think Will Howard, whatever film you watch, whatever things that you saw, the John Gruden QB camp, I think he is great for where he is right now. He is great coming out of college, having played for multiple teams in college, having won a national championship. I think he has a good head on his shoulders, and that's again why I think he is a good pick for the Steelers, and a great pick even at the 6th round to get a future guy that can be in your quarterback room. But that does not make him an NFL starter just yet. So again, I really think this is not to hate on Will Howard for the millionth time, because every time I do this, someone in the comments says, "Oh, Chris Carter just hates Will Howard. He doesn't like him." Shut up. That's not what I'm saying. It's never been what I'm saying. All I'm saying is let that guy be the young guy that no expectations are upon, so that when he does make a play in the preseason, it's like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. And then we can evaluate that. And then we can all have a fun time evaluating the 6th round rookie quarterback, making the occasional play against 2nd and 3rd stringers. But if you're coming out here trying to say, oh, he's the guy, he's going to be the guy, what's the likelihood that he's the guy? Then it's going to be like, well, why is he only doing this to 2nd and 3rd stringers? Why isn't he doing this against 1st stringers? Oh, man, that one time he got in against 1st stringers, he threw a pick. Oh, man, that guy must really suck. We don't need to go down that way because we know how things will get. So enjoy the process of him now. And also enjoy the process of everything else now. The Steelers have so many other developmental pieces that I think are in a reasonable place to take a step forward this year. That's why I think it's really good for Broderick Jones to be in his 3rd year. I think this could be a really good year for him. Zach Frazier, as I wrote about for the Post-Gazette, that guy out of the 21 centers in the NFL last year that had over 1,000 snaps at the center position, that he had the 2nd fewest quarterback pressures allowed, only to Creed Humphrey, who was the best, the first team All-Pro center for the Chiefs, and he's the best center in football right now. Like that, those are the guys you should be really excited about. Like, hey, these guys could really turn it up. Joey Porter Jr. could really turn it up. And I'm telling you, you're hyped about Will Howard right now because I think Pittsburgh is just thirsty for the next young quarterback that can just end the search, end the pain of having to go from quarterback to quarterback, from Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky to Mason Rudolph to Justin Fields to Russell Wilson to Aaron Rodgers and then Will Howard. You want that guy. But I'm telling you, when you sit back and you watch this college football season and you see some of these quarterbacks play, and you start comparing them to what Will Howard was doing and what they're doing with the tools they have versus what Will Howard did with the tools that he had, you'll probably be sitting there saying, oh, wait a second. Yeah, those guys are of like a higher pedigree. And there's a reason why a lot of people are saying those guys are first round picks. That's what I'm saying. And it's not to discredit Will Howard. I think that he's fine for what he is. But there's a reason he was drafted where he was, and there's a reason why I think the Steelers are loading up, which we know they have. They've loaded up on third-round picks. They've loaded up on comp picks. They're getting ready to make a move because they think next year is the year. And if it's not, they'll be prepared. They'll move. They'll make adjustments. If this year it turns out to be bad quarterbacks, they'll make adjustments to that. But we got to stop doing the Will Howard thing. I know I'm going to have to talk about it again before training camp because someone's going to keep bringing it up. But we'll do that we'll do that again sometime here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can also check me out here every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Back here tomorrow with another episode here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.